She gave her last transport money to a stranger at the bus stop. Then she walked home, 40 minutes in the afternoon heat. No complaints, no bitterness, just her feet on the road and her head held exactly the way it always was. That was Abisola Edwale, a market woman in Ilesa, Nigeria, who had refused 3 wealthy men because she believed money turned people into strangers to themselves. Then a Korean man arrived in her compound with one small bag, broken Yoruba, and a smile that made everything around him feel more interesting than it was a minute before. She thought he was a student, a researcher from Pohang with no money and too many questions. She was wrong. And what she discovered, on an ordinary Friday morning, standing in front of a construction banner outside her market, was going to cost her everything she thought she knew about love, class, and the difference between a man who knows right from wrong and a man who chooses it. Welcome to Dark Afro-K Diaries, family. If this is your first time here, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in real love, and hit that subscribe button right now. Let's get into the story. Abisola was not a quiet woman. Not as a child following her mother through the Ilesa market. Not as a teenager learning to count change faster than the traders twice her age. Not now, at 28, with her voice carrying 3 rows deep and her laughter arriving before she did. Her stall was the third from the corner on the eastern row of Ilesa Central Market. Second-hand fabric, printed Ankara, tailoring offcuts, whatever she could source cheaply enough to sell at a fair margin. She was not rich. She had never been rich, but she knew exactly who she was. Iyatobi, the smoked fish seller 2 stalls down, called her Abisola the Impossible. Not as an insult, as a nickname earned by respect. The woman who could not be moved, could not be fooled, and could not, for reasons that baffled everyone who loved her, be married. 3 men from Lagos money had tried. 2 came with envelopes. 1 came with a car. All 3 went home with those same things, and a very clear explanation from Abisola about what she thought of men who believed a woman's future could be purchased in one afternoon. By common agreement, she had decided exactly what she wanted from life and was waiting, without apology, for the version of it that made sense. She did not want money. She did not want status. She wanted a man who was the same person in private that he was in public. A man who did not change shape depending on who was watching. In Ilesa, in the year she turned 28, everyone thought this made her a romantic fool. They had not yet met Siakwu. It was a Tuesday. Market days were always either very good or very instructive, and this one had been instructive in the way that left a person slightly winded. She had sold less than half of what she needed. A supplier from Ibadan canceled without notice. Her transport money for the week was already committed to paying the remaining balance on her stall rent, which her landlord had raised without the grace of advance warning. And underneath all of that was the thing she did not speak about to anyone. Her mother's medication bills were 2 months overdue. It was not an abstract threat. The pharmacy in Okamoro had been patient. The hospital had been patient. But patience had a ceiling, and she could feel that ceiling getting lower every week. Her mother's blood pressure medication was not optional. Without the market income, not next month's income, not a future windfall, just the steady, reliable income of the Eastern Row, the bills went to collections. And after collections, there was no medication. She carried this the way she carried everything, without announcement. She was walking to the bus stop with her accounts in her head when she noticed the woman on the bench. Older. Maybe 60, maybe more. Sitting with both hands in her lap and the expression of someone who had been there for a very long time and had quietly accepted she might be there much longer. Faded blouse. A wrapper ironed to dignity despite its age. At her feet was one small bag, nothing else. Abisola walked past her. She got 3 steps away and stopped. She turned back. "Mama, where are you going?" The woman looked up. "I'll shack your road. My son is expecting me." Abisola did the maths again. This time the number at the end was the woman's transport fare, not her own. She reached into her purse. She counted out the exact amount. She pressed it into the woman's hand. The woman looked at the money. Then she looked at Abisola with the kind of gratitude that is more complicated than joy. The gratitude of someone who did not want to need help and felt both relieved and ashamed at once. "God will repay you," the woman said. "Don't worry about that," Abisola said. "Just get there safe." She walked home, 40 minutes in the heat, her shoes rubbing at the heel. her head aching from the afternoon sun, her mother's medication bills somewhere behind her eyes. She did not complain once. Not to anyone, not even to herself. Family, drop a comment right now if this is the kind of woman you would ride or die for. Because everything that is about to happen to Abisola, she has earned every bit of it. The following morning, before she left for the market, Iya Remy from the next apartment started the conversation that Abisola would think about for months. "You will grow old looking for a man with nothing," Iya Remy said. "Nobody with nothing can build something." Abisola finished tying her jewel. She looked at the woman steadily. "I am not looking for what a man has," she said. "I am looking for who he is when nobody is watching." She left before Iya Remy could respond. Remember that sentence, family. Who he is when nobody is watching. It was the question Abisola had been asking her whole life. And it was the question that Seok Jang, heir to one of South Korea's 10 largest corporations, currently standing in Lagos Airport with one small bag and a very well-prepared cover story, was about to find himself entirely unprepared to answer. The trouble with the market had been building for 6 months before it arrived in the form of a notice. It said, in formal language designed to be difficult to challenge, that the Ilesa Central Market Block was subject to a pending acquisition by a development consortium based in Lagos, a mixed-use commercial complex. Affected traders would be relocated to a designated site in the Outer District. The Outer District. Abisola knew what that meant. The Outer District market was 40 minutes from the town center. Move the stalls 40 minutes away and you did not relocate a market. You ended it. She read the notice twice. She photographed it and sent it to her lawyer in Osogbo, a woman she had gone to secondary school with. The lawyer called back that afternoon. "This is real," she said. "The consortium has been acquiring land across the southwest for 18 months. Abisola, you need to get organized. Quickly." That night, Abisola called a meeting in the compound. 12 traders came. She sat with a notebook and a torch because NEPA had taken the light again. She explained exactly what was happening, what it would cost them, and what she thought they could do about it. Half of them were afraid. 3 said they would sign whatever the consortium put in front of them. 2 said they would do whatever Abisola decided. "We fight," she said. "Legally, we document everything. We find out who is behind this consortium. We do not move." She said it with the kind of certainty that made people believe things were possible that they had not believed 5 minutes earlier. She did not tell them she was frightened too. She did not tell them about her mother's medication bills. She did not tell them that every day the market was threatened was another day her mother was one refusal away from no prescription. She held all of that alone. It was into this situation that Seok Jang arrived in Ilesa. Before we go further, family, you need to understand something about this man. Seok Jang did not arrive in Ilesa with doubts. He did not arrive disillusioned with his father's world. He did not arrive secretly hoping to be saved from himself by a market woman in Ilesa. He arrived as his father's instrument. He had read the acquisition brief on the flight from Incheon. 63 registered traders in the Eastern Market Block. Estimated resettlement cost per trader, 240,000 naira. Total human cost, calculable. Acceptable, in the language of the brief, within the framework of market expansion and economic development. He had read those words and he had not felt nothing. He had felt the specific discomfort of a man who has learned, through one prior experience, to keep that discomfort very quiet. Because 3 years earlier, he had flagged a similar acquisition, a smaller one, in a coastal city in Busan, and written a formal objection in the internal report. The community impact exceeded the projected margins, he had written. He had used the correct language. He had filed it through the correct channels. His father had overruled it in one phone call, and then Seok Jang had signed the papers anyway. He had signed them. He had sat at the desk and he had signed them. And he had told himself that one objection was the limit of what he could do from inside the system, and that the system would have to be changed from above, not below, and that his time would come. He had believed this for 3 years. He believed it when he arrived in Ilesa. He did not know yet that Ilesa was not going to give him the comfortable distance his father's logic required. He did not know that 63 traders, when they become specific people in a specific market with specific faces and specific fights, and a specific woman leading the resistance, Do not stay in the abstract language of the acquisition brief for very long. He arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Abisola heard him before she saw him because his Yoruba was extraordinary in its wrongness. Each word placed with tremendous confidence in entirely the wrong position. Ikabo, he was saying to Baba landlord at the compound gate. Ikabo is for welcome, Baba landlord said in English, not for arrival. Ah, a pause. Ijao, that is please. He stood at the entrance with a travel bag conspicuously small for someone claiming to stay 3 months. Tall, simple clothes, trainers that were not cheap if you knew what to look for. His face was open in the way that faces are open when the person wearing them has not yet learned to perform composure. He looked at the compound like it was the most interesting place he had been in a very long time. Baba landlord introduced him. Cultural research student from Pohang National University, documenting informal trade economies in secondary Nigerian cities. Abisola looked at him for 2 seconds and went back to her inventory. Welcome to the compound, she said, without looking up. He stood there for a moment. You are a trader? He asked. Yes, in the market that is under acquisition threat, she looked up. Word travels fast. I asked Baba landlord, he said simply. I wanted to understand the neighborhood. She said nothing to that, but she filed it somewhere. A person who asks questions in order to understand things. She filed it and went back to her inventory. His name was Jang Siakwu. The corporation his father ran was the exact consortium threatening her market, and he had arrived with the acquisition brief in his bag and the Busan papers somewhere behind his eyes. The papers he had signed after filing an objection he believed in, and the particular guilt of a man who has known what the right thing is and done the other thing anyway. The first week of his arrival, Abisola watched him the way she watched suppliers who seemed too generous. With the comfortable suspicion of someone who had learned that things which appear too easy usually have a price that appears later. The problems with his story accumulated quietly. His hands were wrong. A student accumulates texture in their hands from carrying bags, cooking, managing their own space. His hands were smooth in the way that spoke of a life where other people managed the physical parts of living. She noticed this on the 3rd day when he helped her carry fabric rolls from the gate to her stall, not because she asked, but because he saw her struggling and picked up the other end without announcement. His instincts were wrong. When she mentioned the generator repair would cost 40,000 naira, his expression was faint surprise, not at the sum being large, but at the sum being small. He covered it quickly, but she had already seen it. His questions were wrong. Not the questions of a student mapping an abstract economy. The questions of someone who already understood commercial real estate, land valuation, and acquisition law, asking about the market the way a doctor asks about symptoms when they already suspect the diagnosis. She said nothing about any of this. She was not yet sure what she was looking at. What she was sure of was that on 4 separate occasions, without being asked, he had picked up her remaining market goods at the end of the day and helped her carry them back to the compound. He learned the route without being shown it twice. He never mentioned doing it. He never asked for acknowledgement. The men who wanted something from a woman always made sure she noticed what they were doing. They narrated their helpfulness. They invoiced it with their eyes. This man did none of that. He just helped, and then went back to his room and his notebooks and his terrible Yoruba practice. She could hear him through the thin compound walls, repeating words quietly in the dark. Ikabo, welcome. Ikabo, as though the country itself were a language he was trying to earn the right to speak. She walked home one evening after 3 weeks and sat in the compound after dark and thought, this is a dangerous man. Not dangerous the way the envelope men were dangerous. Dangerous the way a door left open in winter is dangerous, not because of what comes in through it, but because of how much warmth you let out. She did not know what to do with this thought, so she filed it, the way she filed everything she was not yet ready to name. 3 weeks in, Abisola organized the traders' rally. 93 people came. She had expected 60. She stood in front of them with her notes and her voice and the particular quality of preparation that made people feel that something could still be done. She explained the petition process, the legal timeline, the counter-proposal for an alternative site, the documentation the lawyer needed. She was 8 minutes in when a man from the back of the crowd stood up. His name was Baba Kunnel, 40 years on the Western Row. He had the manner of a man who has decided to say the thing everyone is thinking before someone else says it badly. Abisola, he said, we trust you, we know your name, we know your mother's name, we know your stall since you were a child in this market. He paused. But this Korean man, what does he want from you? Why is he really here? You are leading us in a fight, and you have put a stranger inside your strategy. I am asking what no one else will ask. The market went quiet the way crowds go quiet when something important is being decided. Abisola did not look at Siakwu, who was standing at the back of the crowd. She looked at Baba Kunnel. I do not know everything about him yet, she said. Her voice was even. I will not pretend otherwise. She heard someone shift. What I know is what I have seen, she continued. A man who carries market goods without being asked and says nothing about it is not a man who came to take something. A man who sits in a compound and learns a language in the dark because he wants to understand a place, that is not the behavior of a man who has contempt for it. She paused. I am not asking you to trust him. I am asking you to trust me. I have not trusted the wrong person yet. I do not intend to start now. Baba Kunnel looked at her for a long moment, then he sat down. The rally continued. Siakwu stood at the back of the crowd with his notebook closed. Because what Abisola had said about him, in public, in front of 93 people, before she knew the full truth, was the most honest thing anyone had said about him in years. And it was built entirely on what she had observed. And none of it was wrong. And that was the specific thing he had not been prepared for. That being seen clearly by someone and having that person choose to defend you publicly, before she knew you had reasons to be defended against, was a different kind of weight than anything in the acquisition brief. He felt it settle in his chest. He did not write it down. Some things were too close to the center to put in a notebook. It was that same Thursday evening, after the rally, when she found him at the courtyard table. She sat down beside him uninvited, which was her particular way of indicating that something was about to be discussed. You have contacts, she said, not a question. Corporate lawyers, people who understand acquisition processes. He paused. I can make introductions. Why would you do that? Because it is the right thing to do. That is a very simple answer. It is a very simple truth. Outside the compound, Ilesa was doing its evening things. Generators starting in sequence, music from somewhere down the road, a child crying and then not crying. I do not trust you, she said finally. I want you to know that. I think there are things you are not telling me. He met her eyes. There are, but not the things that would hurt you, I promise. She shook his hand, firm, quick. Fine, we start tomorrow. She walked back inside. He sat in the compound for another 10 minutes alone, with the Busan papers somewhere behind his eyes, thinking about what it meant to make a promise to the person whose fight your family had started. The city opened differently when walked with another person. She took him to the market, not to show off and not to test him in any formal way, but because the market was where she lived her real life and she needed to see what he did when he was inside it. He did not perform, he watched. He asked genuine questions. He wrote in a notebook with a pen, which the market women found hilarious and then charming and then within 40 minutes deeply impressive. Your Ginbo, Iyatobai told Abisola in Yoruba, is the first foreigner I have seen who actually listens. He is not my Ginbo, Abisola said. He walked in here beside you, Iyatobai said. In Ilesa, that is the same thing. As they walked through Okamaro, through Iser, through the older residential streets where compound walls had faded to more complicated colors, he listened with the quality of attention that made people feel, for the duration of the conversation, that they were the most interesting person in the room. One evening, after the market, they sat on the low wall at the edge of the compound, Ilesa doing its permanent noise around them. He had been quiet for a few minutes, the comfortable quiet she was beginning to recognize in him, the quiet of someone who is listening even to silence. Then he asked her something, not about the petition, not about the market, not about the acquisition timeline. What do you want? He said, not from the fight, from your own life. She looked at him. In her experience, men asked women what they wanted in the way that meant, what do you want that I can provide? This was not that question. This was the other kind. The kind that assumed she had a full interior life that had nothing to do with them. She did not answer immediately. Then she said, I want peace. Not comfort, peace is different. Comfort means you stop feeling things because nothing can reach you. Peace means you feel everything and none of it destroys you. I want a life that is full enough that when something tries to take it, I have already been living it. He was quiet. He wrote nothing down. And I want someone who is the same person in private that they are in public, she said. That is all. That is the whole thing. He looked at her in the compound dark. She noticed that he did not offer himself as the answer. He did not say I could be that, or I understand, or anything that made the conversation about him. He just held what she said, quietly, with his full attention. She walked inside that night and thought, I have been saying things I have not said to anyone in years. She noticed this. She noticed that it alarmed her. She noticed that the alarm was not enough to make her stop. Family, have you ever met someone who asked you the right question? Not the question about what you need or what you want from them, but the question about who you actually are when nobody is managing you. Drop a comment, because Abisola is in trouble right now and she knows it. She just does not know how much trouble yet. But before the heart of this story arrived, there was the business of watching Siakwu Jang try to survive in Ilesa. And it must be said that he was magnificently, heroically bad at it. The pepper soup was the first incident. She had not warned him about the level of heat. He ate 3 spoonfuls. His ears turned red. His eyes watered with a dignity she respected. He ate 4 more spoonfuls. His face went through surprise, acceptance, negotiation, and what appeared to be a brief spiritual experience. This is, he said carefully, very flavored. You do not have to finish it, she said. I will finish it, he said, with the conviction of a man making a promise to himself in a war. He finished it. He was silent for the entire walk back. When she asked if he was okay, he said, with complete sincerity, I am recalibrating. Abisola laughed for the first time in front of him that day. A long, genuine laugh. The kind that arrives when something is funnier than you were prepared for. She covered her mouth too late, and the sound had already escaped. He was watching her, with an expression she could not quite name, then the Okada incident. He was told to commit fully. He deployed confidence as a performance rather than a reality. They took a corner at speed. He yelped. Whale, the Okada rider, said without looking back. Oga, hold the handle. I am holding the handle, Siakwu said, with the specificity of someone who wanted to be accurate even in crisis. Hold it like you mean it. He held it like he meant it for the rest of the journey, and stepped off the other end with the expression of a man who had arrived somewhere he was not certain he would reach. That was excellent, he told Whale firmly. Whale drove away shaking his head, but it was the haggling that became the compound's greatest entertainment. The fabric seller quoted him a price. He paid it. Abisola stared at him. You don't negotiate, she said. The price seemed reasonable. The first price is never the real price. He turned back to the seller. What followed was 4 minutes of the most courteous, most grammatically confused, most strategically bewildering price discussion the Eastern Row had witnessed in recent memory. He argued from principle. He asked the seller questions about her sourcing costs. He appeared to be constructing a fair price based on a supply chain analysis. The seller gave him 30% off purely out of respect for the effort. The market women talked about it for a week. Abisola walked home beside him and understood, with a clarity she had not invited, that she had been laughing more in the past 3 weeks than she had in the previous year. She caught herself trying to calculate when it would stop. She did not want it to stop. This alarmed her considerably. It was a Friday morning when the banners went up. Iya Tobai called before 6 o'clock. Abisola pulled on her clothes and walked to the market. The east entrance of Ilesa Central Market had a new installation. A construction hoarding along the eastern wall. Professionally made. It showed the rendered image of the planned commercial complex. Glass, chrome, clean lines, the aspirational architecture of money describing itself to people it was about to displace. And above the rendering, in clean Korean and English lettering, was the development company name. JANG Development, West Africa, Ltd. Abisola stood in front of it for a very long time. The morning market was setting up around her. She was still in the middle of all of it. JANG. She thought about the name, the notebook, the phone calls in Korean, the lawyer who was too well connected for a student's referral, the hands that had never done hard work. The expression when she mentioned 40,000 naira, not shock at the size, but faint surprise at the smallness. She thought about the rally. about what she had said in front of 93 people. A man who carries market goods without being asked is not a man who came to take something. She thought about how sure she had sounded. She stood in front of that hoarding for 11 minutes. Iya Tobai came and stood beside her. Several other traders gathered. Nobody said anything. They were all reading the same name and doing some version of the same calculation. Abisola turned and walked back to the compound. Siakwu was at the courtyard table. He saw her face. He put the notebook down. She walked past him without speaking and went into her room and closed the door. She did not come out for 2 hours. When she did, her face had the controlled stillness of a person who has worked very hard to be calm and succeeded in all the visible ways. "What is your family name?" she asked. "Jang," he said. She nodded slowly. "Jang Development, West Africa." "Yes," she nodded again, that same slow, terrible nod. "I see." She went back to work. She spent the rest of the day at her stall, selling fabric, being exactly who she had always been. She did not speak to him again that day. But that night, she did not sleep. 2 days after the hoarding went up, Jang Hyunwoo arrived in Ilesa. 2 hired cars. 4 men who moved around him with the choreography of security teams. A suit that cost more than Abisola's stall rent for a year. He walked into the compound at 10 in the morning and found his son at the courtyard table. The compound was not prepared for Jang Hyunwoo. There were children near the gate. Iya Remi hanging washing. Baba landlord in his plastic chair, the everyday texture of ordinary life. All of it stopped when the cars arrived. "Siakwu," his father said in Korean. "Father," Siakwu replied in English. The choice of language was not accidental. "You have been here 6 weeks. The acquisition is ready to proceed. You need to come home. I am not finished. Your observation period is complete. The development proceeds regardless of anything you have found here." "Father, there are people here whose livelihoods will be destroyed. I need more time to—" "That is not your concern. Your concern is the corporation, the succession. Stop performing poverty and come home." Iya Remi did not speak Korean. She would later tell everyone she had understood every word. What she meant was that she had understood everything that mattered, the cold authority in the older man's voice, the resistance in the younger man's, and the thing between them that was not anger, but the shape left when love and obligation occupy the same space for too long. Siakwu said nothing for a long moment. "I will call you tonight," he said. "You will come home," his father said, with the finality of a statement, not a conversation. He left. The compound exhaled. Abisola was standing at the door of her room. She could not understand the Korean, but she had heard the name Jang. She had seen the cars. She had seen the 4 men. She had seen the suit. She looked at Siakwu's face after his father left. She saw shame, not the shame of being caught. The shame of a person who has known something is wrong and has not yet done the right thing about it. She went back inside and sat on the edge of her bed. He knew. He has known this entire time. And he stayed, and he helped, and he made me laugh, and he listened to me, and he knew. She found him that evening at the compound gate. She stood beside him, the distance of someone who has not yet decided how angry they are. "Tell me everything," she said. He told her. He did not soften it. He stood with his hands in his pockets and looked at the street and spoke in a flat, factual voice. The voice of a man who has decided the only thing he has left is honesty and is going to deploy it completely. His father's corporation had been acquiring land in secondary southwest cities for 2 years. The Ilesa market block was identified 8 months ago. He had been sent here to observe, to document resistance, to identify legal complications, to assess the human situation in the cold language of the acquisition brief. His cover story was prepared in advance. She listened to all of it without moving. "You came here to study us," she said, not a question. "Yes. My struggle, my market, my people, all of that was your research project. At the beginning. Yes, and the lawyer, the legal petition, the contacts in Lagos. I found them through family connections. I did not tell you that. You helped us build a case against your own father's company." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "Why?" she said. He turned to look at her for the first time in the conversation. "Because it was right." "That is not enough," she said. "Why?" The honesty of the next sentence cost him something visible. She watched it cost him. "Because you showed me what right looked like," he said. "I had not seen it clearly before, not like this." She looked at him. She did not shout. She had considered shouting. she had considered rage. But what she felt underneath everything was a grief that was quieter and more devastating than anger. The grief of someone who has been given something real and then discovered it was built on a compromised foundation. "Get out," she said, not loud, precise. "Pack your bag and go to whatever hotel your father's money has already reserved, and stay there." He did not argue, he nodded. "I am sorry," he said. "I know," she said. "Go," he went. She stood at the gate after he left and watched the street until the sound of the hired car faded and the city sounds closed back in over the space it had occupied. Then she went inside. She sat on the floor with her back against the wall and her knees drawn up. The position of a person trying to make themselves small enough that the thing they are feeling cannot find them. She had been right to be suspicious. She had been right about everything. She had let him in anyway. And this specific, particular kind of correctness was the most painful kind of all. Siaku sat on the 17th floor of the hotel his father's assistant had booked, a floor he had refused for 6 weeks and now occupied because he had nowhere else to go. Ilesa was below him through the glass, the randomized illumination of a city living through an evening without him in it. He could see, if he oriented himself correctly, the direction of the market. He knew the street by now. He could map it without looking. He called his father and said he would return to Seoul at the end of the week. His father said good. The call ended in under 2 minutes, their standard duration. He sat for a long time. He thought about the rally, about what Abisola had said in front of 93 people before she knew the full truth. A man who carries market goods without being asked is not a man who came to take something. She had defended him publicly with the evidence of his behavior. Before she knew, she had reasons to defend against him. He thought about the evening on the compound wall. The question he had asked her, "What do you want from your own life?" and the way she had answered it. Not performing, not managing, just telling him the actual true thing. He had written in his notebook that night, in Korean, so no one would read it. "I have never met anyone like this." He had spent his adult life in boardrooms and succession meetings, convinced that the world operated on the logic his father had taught him, that everything had a price. That sentiment was a strategy deployed by people who wanted something from you. Abisola Adwale had not taught him this was wrong. She had simply existed in front of him so completely and so unmanaged that the architecture of his father's logic became impossible to inhabit comfortably. She gave her last transport money to a stranger and walked 40 minutes home in the heat and did not complain once. She organized 93 frightened people and made them believe they were not alone. And then there was Busen. The papers he had filed an objection on, the papers he had signed anyway. 3 years of telling himself that the system would be changed from above, not below, that his time would come. He had been inside the system his entire adult life and had never once stood outside it for long enough to understand what it cost the people the system was built on top of. Until 6 weeks in a compound in Ilesa. Until one woman who was the same person in private that she was in public. He opened his laptop. He found the acquisition authorization document. His signature was required, as heir and joint signatory, to complete the final phase of the land transfer. He read it for a long time, then he picked up the phone, not to his father, to the family legal office in Seoul. This time, he was not going to file an objection. The email arrived on Abisola's phone on a Monday morning, forwarded from her lawyer in Osogbo with a short note attached. "Your friend in Korea made calls. The market is protected. Check the attached." She read the attached document. The acquisition of the Ilesa Central Market Block would not proceed. The development rights had been formally returned to the Asan State Planning Authority. A legal designation had been filed, protecting the Eastern Market Block from commercial acquisition for 25 years. 25 years. She read it 3 times. Then she put her phone face down on the table. She sat with the document for a long time. She thought about what she expected to feel. She had expected anger still. She had expected the righteous clarity of someone whose suspicion had been proven correct, whose refusal to be fooled had been vindicated. She felt none of that. What she felt was something quieter and more complicated, something that had no comfortable name. She was not angry anymore, and she did not know what to do with that, because the document told her he knew right from wrong. The acquisition brief, the 6 weeks in the compound, the Busen papers he had not told her about, All of it told her he had known for a long time what was right and had not always chosen it. But the document told her he had chosen it now. And she was sitting on her floor with the phone face down on the table, and she was not angry, and the absence of anger was somehow harder to hold than the anger itself had been. Because anger had a direction. It told you what to do. This did not tell her what to do. It told her she still cared. It told her she had been caring this entire time. And that was the most frightening information she had received since the name appeared on the building. Family, this is the real all is lost moment. Not the night she sent him away. This, because she can survive being lied to, she has survived harder things. What she cannot survive comfortably is this, caring about someone when the caring has not stopped, even after it should have. Have you been here, when the anger left and something worse replaced it? Drop your story below. This is a safe space. She did not go to the hotel. She sat with the document for 2 days. Then she called him, not to reconcile, to finish what the first conversation had not finished. Because she understood now that sending him away had been the rupture, and the rupture was not the same as the reckoning. She needed the reckoning. He arrived at the compound gate in the evening. She was already outside, sitting on the low wall. She had been there for a while. He stood at the gate. She looked at him and said, "Sit down." He sat. "The document," she said. "Yes, you protected the market." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I am not here about the document." He waited. "You watched me build a case against your own family for 6 weeks," she said. "You watched me sit with those traitors and explain what was at stake. You watched me try to figure out how I was going to keep my mother's medication paid for while fighting a legal battle I did not have the resources to win. You held all of that, you watched all of that, and you said nothing." He did not look away. "Yes, that is what I am naming," she said. "Not the lie about the cover story, the other thing. The thing of watching someone fight and knowing you were on the other side of the fight and saying nothing." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I signed the Busan papers." She did not know what the Busan papers were. She waited. 3 years ago, he said. Similar acquisition, different city. I wrote a formal objection. I filed it through the right channels. My father overruled it in one phone call, and then I signed the papers anyway. I sat at the desk and I signed them. And I told myself the system would be changed from above, not below, that my time would come. He looked at the compound wall, the low wall they had sat on for weeks. "That is what I brought to Ilesa," he said. "Not just the acquisition brief. That. The knowledge of what it costs to stay inside the system and the habit of staying inside it anyway. You were the first person who showed me what it looked like to refuse the system at personal cost and not treat the refusal as heroic. You treated it as just the thing that was done. Of course you fight. Of course you do not move. The rest is logistics." He looked at her. "I had never met anyone for whom the right thing was not a decision," he said. "It was just the only available option. And I had been making it a decision for 3 years. I had been deciding to do the other thing and calling it strategy." Abisola listened to all of this. Then she said, "What did you feel when you watched me at the rally?" He answered without hesitating. "Shame," he said, "specific shame. The shame of a person who has signed the papers and is watching someone refuse to sign the papers. And underneath the shame, something else. Something I did not have a word for at the time." "What was it?" "Recognition," he said. "Of what I should have been, of who I could be if I made a different choice." He paused. "You did not teach me the right thing. I already knew the right thing. You showed me that knowing it and doing it could be the same." The compound was quiet around them. Ilsa doing its permanent noise beyond the walls. She looked at him for a long time. "The document," she said finally, "tells me you know right from wrong. I did not need the document to tell me that. I knew it when you carried my bundles without being asked, when you practiced Yoruba in the dark so you could earn the right to speak it." She paused. "The document tells me you chose it when it cost you something real. That is different." She stood up. She looked down at him. "Your Yoruba is still terrible," she said. "Yes," he said. "You have time to work on it," she said. "If you stay," he looked up at her. He understood what she meant. She said, "Come inside." He followed her. She lit the small kerosene lamp she used when any PA had taken the power. The room filled with the specific warm light of Ilsa at night, the light she had lived her entire life by, the amber that made everything look like something worth keeping. He stood in the center of her room, and for the first time he saw it fully. The indigo fabric pinned on the wall, a piece she had never been able to bring herself to sell. The market ledger on the table, her mother's medication schedule written on a torn piece of paper tucked inside the cover. The photograph of her father on the shelf above the window, taken when she was 6 years old and the city behind him was smaller and the future was uncalculated. He was looking at her actual life. Not the stall, not the rally, not the woman who led 93 frightened traders and made them believe something could still be done. The room where she came home, she said. You watched me for 6 weeks and you were studying me, now I want you to see me. He said, I see you. She said, not yet, but you will. She stepped toward him. She put her hand flat against his chest, not claiming. Not rushing, just present. She could feel his heartbeat. It was fast. She looked at his face in the lamplight and saw the managed composure finally, completely gone. He was just himself. The man who ate the pepper soup until his ears changed color and refused to acknowledge it. The man who carried her bundles without being asked and said nothing about it. The man who wrote in his notebook in Korean so no one would read what he felt. She said, I am not a project. I am not a research subject. I am not the woman who saved your conscience. I know, he said. Then who am I? He answered her with the specific, honest truth. You are Abisola Adwale, he said. You are the most real person I have ever been in a room with. You are the woman who showed me what it looks like to be the same person in private that you are in public. He looked at her. You are the person I came to this compound not knowing existed, and I do not want to leave this compound without you knowing that. She pulled him toward her by the collar. She kissed him, not the beginning of a kiss. The kind that is the full statement of a decision that has been building for 5 weeks. He was careful in the way of someone who understands that this space is given and not taken. The care of a man who has spent 5 weeks learning that the most important things cannot be purchased or managed, only received. His hands were at her face first, then her shoulders, learning the geography of her the way he learned the market, completely, without rushing, with his whole attention. She was not performing anything. She was herself in this room, in this light, in this city. The woman who walked 40 minutes in the heat and did not complain. The woman who led 93 frightened people and made them believe they were not alone. She brought all of that into this room. She did not make herself smaller. He said her name, not Miss Adwale, not the formal register. Her name in the way that means you, specifically you, of all possible people. She said his. Just Siakwu. In the specific way that names become more than their syllables. When they came together, it was the resolution of 5 weeks of careful watching from opposite sides of a compound wall. His full attention finally arriving somewhere it was not being managed, her warmth finally going through a door that had been left open long enough. He learned her the way he had learned the haggling, the pepper soup, the Okada logic, fully committed, nothing held back, entirely present. She felt, for the first time in the 5 weeks, that she was being seen completely. Not the market woman, not the organizer, not the woman he came to study, the actual person. Afterward they lay in the warm lamplight, Ilesa outside the window doing its permanent noise, his hand in her hair, her head against his chest. Both of them very still. She said, Your Yoruba is still terrible. He said, I am working on it. She said, You have time. He held her closer. He understood what she meant. The lamp stayed on all night. 3 months later. The Ilesa Central Market. Eastern row, 3rd stall from the corner. Abisola's stall was the same deep indigo attire, yellow and black kente offcuts, purple batik from the Ibadan supplier who had stopped trying to short her because it consistently produced the same humbling result. The only difference was the man behind the stall. Siakwu Jang, who had returned from Seoul after a conversation with his father that lasted 3 hours and restructured the terms of his succession, a trade he made without hesitation, was attempting to sell a piece of Ankara fabric. The customer, a woman in her 40s who had been coming to this market for 20 years, could identify a novice in 30 seconds. How much? She asked. 4,500, Siakwu said. I will give you 3,000. 3,500, final price. The woman looked at him. She looked at the fabric. She looked at Abisola, who was watching with an expression trying very hard not to be pride and failing. 3,200, the woman said. 3,400, Siakwu said. Because the color you have chosen is technically in the premium category, and I would be doing the supplier a disservice." The woman stared at him. She turned to Abisola. "Where did you find this one?" "He arrived," Abisola said, "and then he stayed." The woman bought the fabric. Siakwu told Abisola quietly afterward that he had absorbed the 40 naira shortfall because sometimes you let someone feel they have one in order to bring them back. "You sound like a business person," Abisola said. "I grew up as one," he said. "I just forgot to apply it anywhere that mattered." She looked at him. "You are getting better at this," she said. "I have a good teacher. You still cannot haggle properly. I am learning." That evening, they sat together on the low compound wall, the same wall where he had learned her language, the same wall where she had learned his silences, the same wall where she had defended him to a crowd before she knew she had reasons to defend against him, also doing its permanent noise around them. She reached over and took his hand. He held it. They did not say anything. He took out his notebook. He wrote something slowly, in careful Yoruba, the handwriting of a man who takes nothing for granted. Ife ko wa nikin, o fi han wani tia leji. Love does not just show us who someone is. It shows us who we could be. She read it. She looked at him. He was watching her with the expression of a man who has found the country he was meant to live in and has decided he is going to earn the right to stay. "Your Yoruba spelling," she said, "is a disaster." "I know," he said, not looking away. She took the notebook. She corrected 2 letters. She handed it back. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder. The market did not stop for them. Neither of them wanted it to. "Family, we made it to the end. And if your chest is full right now, if Abisola and Siakwu have you believing that real love is possible even when it starts in the most complicated way, then this story did exactly what it was meant to do. Because this was never just a love story. It was a story about what a man owes the woman he has been hiding from. A story about the difference between knowing what is right and choosing it. A story about the specific courage it takes to name what a lie cost you, out loud, to the person who told it, and the even greater courage of what happens after that. And Siakwu showed us which man he was. Not with words. With a phone call to Seoul. With a 30% inheritance stake laid on a table for a market in Ilesa he had no legal obligation to protect. And with showing up to a compound gate, at night, to sit on a low wall and answer for the full cost of what he had held in silence. That is what love looks like, family, not the gesture, the answer. If this story moved you, please like this video right now. It only takes 1 second and it means everything to this channel. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded that the right person will not just do the right thing. They will come back and name what the wrong thing cost you. And they will answer for it directly. Subscribe to Dark Afro-K Diaries if you are not already family. We tell stories like this every single week. Stories that hit different. Stories that stay with you. Hit that notification bell so you never miss what is coming next. Because next week, family, we have a story about a woman who married a man she had never met to save her family, and a man who had been rejected by 3 women for something he could not change about himself. She was not afraid of him, and that changed everything. Until then, be the kind of person who is the same in private that you are in public, because someone out there is looking for exactly that. This is Dark Afro-K Diaries. We will see you in the next story.